Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So today is going to be a very unique video because we're going to discuss how you can find the perfect sensitivity in pretty much any video game. But for this example, I'm going to be showcasing Apex Legends in the background for everyone here. We're going to utilize Aimlab in case you do not have Apex Legends, which is also a free game. We'll do all these exercises as well in Aimlab, and I'm also going to break down theories. I will timestamp this video so you can have everything there, but I will timestamp the theories that we're going to discuss. So some of the theories that we're going to break down in today's video is going to be sensitivity applicable to a specific type of game. We're going to discuss the mouse weight, mouse pad, meaning the type of friction or non-friction that exists within the pad for the most part, you know, less friction. Then we're also going to discuss grip style and hand size. We're also going to discuss muscle build and posture. And then we're going to wrap up with diet. So as I've been working out, I've really discovered how much these variables really matter, and I've really taken a big look back of my sensitivity throughout the years and how I've adjusted, how I've improved my mouse control, and how that changes. So you'll find as you continue to improve at a game or your sensitivity and your mouse control, you will find just how much you will continue to adjust and change depending on how those muscles continue to grow, or even how your daily life starts to change, such as diet or how much you work out and so forth. Let us discuss how we're going to find your sensitivity in game, in Apex Legends. So the biggest thing that you want to look for is you want to do your checklist. You want to make sure, can you do a solid 180? Can you do 180s? Is that doable? Can you track with, let's say, an R99 or let's say a Volt or even R301, anything on those lines to control just a basic track? And also, can you shoot long range wingman shots and also close range wingman shots? So let's go over first and foremost and really discuss, can you really just do a 180? So in this example right now, I have a relatively decent sensitivity right now. It's definitely on the slower end. As you can tell, I really need to pick up my mouse and move it around. But even just doing this exercise and moving around back and forth, doing like a super jump into the air and seeing if you can do yourself a little flick is a great exercise to do. If you can't do a clean 180, let's say if I were to drop my sensitivity here a significant amount, let's say it was 0.1. In this case, it said 0.2, so I guess we'll do 0.2. Notice how much harder it is. Granted, my tracking is going to be quite nice, but how much I have to lift my mouse just to do a clean 180, and that's not even like full ADS, like if I need to do anything else, which in itself is a major problem. So the same issue when you're doing a 180, yeah, you can do, let's say, let's do 1.2 sensitivity here, and it's super fast. It may be too fast to control for, let's say, if you wanted to hit a wingman shot from a distance and you wanted to hit this and you wanted to hit it reliably in the head. The beauty behind sensitivity is as you improve your mouse control, you're going to find that you can kind of work within any sensitivity. So if this is super fast, I mean, I can just, you know, do a 180 for days and spin around. But if I needed to hit something really, really small from a distance, you can also use these targets over here. There's targets all the way across over here. Most people actually are not aware of these targets that exist this far away. You can work on your long range shots. There we go, and I'm finally hitting it. I'm not used to the sensitivity, but you get used to it, and then you find the middle ground. You keep adjusting, you keep going down. What I do is I post my sensitivities into a mouse pad, or excuse me, notepad, and I start to highlight which ones are solid sensitivities for me and which one is not, and where does the sweet spot feel. I'm like, okay, this is kind of decent. Maybe I can go a little faster, maybe I can go a little slower, but you really start to highlight each of the sensitivities and go up and down, up and down. So the first and foremost, again, is just doing, can you do a clean 180 and shoot? Can you track? So if we were to track and you want to hit this target right here, can you do a clean track? So if the answer is no and you can't do a clean track, maybe lower it down until you're using your arms and your finger muscles, which we're going to break down later in terms of all the variables. This is just kind of the initial exercise to kind of identify where you currently sit. It's almost like benchmarking yourself right now. And what you can do is change all the variables and things to benchmark differently, and as you continue to improve, right? And of course, you know, take the wingman, try to get close range shots, same thing. Can you flick between the targets reliably? You know, try just flicking consistently between targets here. And if you can't do it, let's say if I were to drop this down too slow, down to 0.1, and my speed just, granted, you know, I can garner a bit of speed just because I've been doing a lot of aim training and practicing. So this you can make this work for the most part. It's way too slow though, too slow. But if I were to do this, let's say let's bump this up to 3, which, you know, is super fast, like I'm Sonic now. Granted, yeah, I could start to control this, but look how jittery this is. This is completely unrealistic, but not impossible. Listen, if this feels comfortable for you, that doesn't mean the sensitivity is necessarily wrong. Because at the same time, if I were to track with this, you can start to see where I could work on this. I can make this potentially work. Where almost there's like, it feels like there's no recoil. The sensitivity is so fast. Even though like these are 2 spectrums, you saw me use a spectrum of aim from a fast sensitivity from 3 all the way down to 0.1, and right now I'm utilizing 1800 dpi. This is going to be a longer video, just FYI. Notice how I'm even here, I can at least flick between targets. That's not that positive, but it can be jarring switching between sensitivity. This is why you write them down, see where the pros and cons and where you sit, and this is going to go into the variables. So now what we need to do is we're going to go into Aimlab, and we're going to apply these same exercises that are very similar to a long-range wingman shot, close-range wingman shot, and tracking and 180s, and we're going to do it in Aimlab to where you can mess with this as well, and also have a slider that's going to help you out figure out how many centimeters or inches per 360 you're using. So let's head over.
Hello and welcome back. So what we're going to do in this portion is we're going to find your Aimlab sensitivity, well, the perfect sensitivity for you in Aimlab. Alright, so this is a great scenario. We're going to cover 4 of them. This is the first of 4. We're going to do spider shot 180s. This is a really great scenario, specifically, as you can see in my hand, I need to move around a little bit. I do have the camera above, so it kind of makes it a little funky of an angle for me to kind of aim. This is, what's great about Aimlab as well is that you can use a full 360 distance. If you scroll all the way down, you can change this to advanced, and you can change your sensitivity. You can change it to inches. Right now I have to centimeters specifically. I know that's a little bit more universally known. So right now I have it set to 53 centimeters per 360. So what does that mean? Like if I have a little ruler here, or measuring tape, excuse me, and I were to measure centimeters, I need to pull the opposite end here. If I were to measure centimeters, and I were to go a full 360, how many centimeters that would take? So right now, definitely going to take the full mouse pad for 53, meaning you have to lift your pad to do a full 360 movement. So what's great about this scenario that really helps you figure out what you need to do, especially for games like Apex Legends, or really any game that you have to do a full 180, is to understand the distance that you'll need to shoot. And you can adjust this depending on your speed and what you are looking to achieve. Because the thing is that you can change your sensitivity and you can go really fast. Let's say, for example, I go all the way down to maybe more of like a Quake sensitivity. Let's go around 24 centimeters or 23, just ballpark it right now. And let's say you can control it, or can you control it? Does it work? Are you overshooting? And the reality is, as you continue to improve, for those that are a lot more advanced users, you're going to find that you can work them on multiple sensitivities. The question is, where is your current sweet spot and what can you currently utilize? Because as you can tell, I can switch between various sensitivities, and this happens for a lot of people. You may have a full spectrum of sensitivities that you can utilize where you have really great mouse control. But it's just a matter of dialing in to figure out what will work for you. It's why a lot of pros tend to switch sensitivities. It doesn't ruin muscle memory, because as you can tell very quickly, I adjust and get very comfortable. Meaning I have faith that you can as well. I'm very confident that you at home can also get very comfortable with various sensitivities. The interesting thing is that you have to work on these muscles and build them up. The very interesting story is that initially, whenever I was using a very low sensitivity, playing various games, and this is a very low one, this one may not be very manageable, and we're going to get a horrible score here, but that's okay, because we're just testing things out, is that my forearm, after using a low sensitivity for like a day or two, I remember it specifically because I woke up and my forearm felt sore, meaning I was a little bit too tense, trying to be too quick. It's almost like waving your hand. So if I'm waving my hand back and forth, that's almost the same general motion. That's very relaxed. You don't need to stress out your arm for speed. Speed comes with confidence and accuracy in time. You don't necessarily have to full-on stress out those muscles. To garner speed, you need to slowly build confidence. And yes, there will be a bit of tension, naturally, as you're engaging those muscles. But realize that if you engage them too much, that all you're doing is causing tension. And this is part of the variables that we're going to talk about in just a moment as well after we get done with all these scenarios. But your 180 distance is so vital and so important, specifically for certain games. And we're going to break down all the games after we go through all these scenarios. So let's go to the next scenario, because now you kind of found your 180 distance, right? Let's go over to task. We're going to pull up Circle Track Ultimate. Give me 1 second to pull that up here. Okay, now we have this. Let's go into Circle Track Ultimate. Now that you've kind of figured out your 180 distance, you need to make sure that you can still track a target in between. Is it too fast? Is it too slow for you? Because perhaps you can do a clean 180, but can you keep up with the target that's right in front of you? That's going to be the biggest question that you have. So you can do the same thing. What I usually do is I take a notepad and I write down all the centimeters or inches per 360 that I've utilized and where I feel comfortable in the spectrum, and I put little notes behind next to them. And I'll say, this sensitivity felt comfortable, but not so much. So you remember what you did. You know, put it in a notepad, put it into an Excel document, put it into a Word document, write it down, anything, and literally go line by line to figure out what works for you. So let's say if I was running too low of a sensitivity around 100 centimeters, which is definitely utilized by CSGO pros. CSGO pros have utilized this, and as you can tell, my arm moves a lot more and I have to lift a lot more. But how quickly you can adjust to this. Your brain knows, and you do adjust very quickly to various sensitivities. Even when you're playing a video game and you ADS, your sensitivity is changing, because naturally it'll slow down. It's just a different FOV. You can do the same thing in the opposite spectrum. Let's go to more of a Quake style sensitivity. Let's do 24 cm specifically for that game. And you may find that you may be a little bit more jittery on the track. You may not be. Maybe you have a nice smoothness to it. And there's pros and cons of all of this, right? Whenever your hands are cold and a higher sensitivity, you might struggle a bit more. Maybe when I just woke up in the morning, so perhaps I'm more relaxed right now, but maybe as I start to work during the day, I garner more tension, so a higher sensitivity becomes a problem. How I eat during the day also impacts this. And there's all these little things to be mindful of that are going to impact your aim and sensitivity. So you need to be mindful of what you utilize. Maybe as you get nervous and adrenaline kicks in, the faster sensitivity will cause jitteriness. If you've been in the clutch 1v1 situation in CSGO or Valorant, or perhaps in the top 3 situation on Apex Legends for a tournament, or maybe not even a tournament, but for anything else, those scenarios matter a whole lot, because those are going to impact how you smooth out your aim or how you play. It's very important. Those are all additional factors that we'll talk about as well in just a moment. But this is a good scenario that you need to utilize to really improve. So let's go into the next task, and we're going to do the opposite spectrum. So we kind of got some of the larger movements out of the way. One of the scenarios that we really need to look at now is going to be VCT tracking, but now it's called Valorant Ascent tracking. We're going to join into this. And what you're going to notice right away is how little of a motion that you need to have. And so I do this a lot. I stretch out my hand in between. I do it so naturally now that I don't think about it, but keeping stretches, doing consistent stretches. I forgot what sensitivity I'm on. I think I'm on the faster one. No, it's actually one of the slower ones. After using a low sensitivity on the hundreds, your brain kind of adjusts, and you need to kind of slow down your hand. And you realize, okay, wait a minute. What do I need to do to kind of iron out this sensitivity? And there you go. You start to kind of feel it out. And you can do the same thing. You'll notice that you garner a smoothness by being at a very low sensitivity. If I'm using a low one, this is why a lot of CSGO pros you'll see use such a low sensitivity. Not one of this slow of a magnitude, but you'll see where you can get the smoothness. So if you are ever struggling with your aim and getting a smooth aim, start really slow and work your way up and understand how those muscles work, because you have to train them. Not necessarily just banging your head against the wall on one sensitivity is going to help. You have to teach your hand mouse control. Is teaching it. You have to build those muscles. Especially like when you're working out, as an example, when you're lifting a big weight, you need to do it slowly to work on all the muscles in the arm. And if you do it quickly, then you're only engaging most of the big ones. And the same thing can happen whenever you use a high sensitivity. You'll notice that it requires, you'll see my mouse move a lot less, and it requires a whole different onset of muscles there. So if we do the scenario here at a faster one, You can adjust to this. You just have to be mindful of what muscles that you're engaging. And I can tell you the muscles that I'm engaging in my hand and where I feel them. So at the higher sensitivity here, I feel it here and also around my thumb, and then I have my fingers here for dexterity, which we'll talk about the grip styles also in a minute. But if I'm feeling it, and the way I hold it, I feel it a lot here from the control, especially as I'm waking up here, the impact that that can have on your sensitivity and your control. So very, very important to understand. This will teach you that, and especially for the lower sensitivity, this engages more of my forearm here. I really enjoy being a low sensitivity player because I've sniped a lot in Battlefield. So I naturally have my whole arm on my desk, but that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. And we're going to talk about that posture stuff in just a moment, and you can kind of see my arm kind of sits, but I also hover depending on what I'm trying to achieve. If I'm trying to be a little bit more accurate, I'll kind of plant a little bit more. I don't go into a claw. I don't touch the mouse pad with my wrist necessarily. I have to still lift a little bit. It almost kind of hovers, but still touches it here and there. But that's how I aim, and it depends, because even if I'm at a higher sensitivity, then I definitely touch the mouse pad a lot more, because you're engaging a whole different onset of muscles there. So you start to develop your own style. So as we even go into grip styles and talk about that, you will see just how much that you kind of develop what works for you and your own personal, I guess you can call it genetics, things that gravitate towards you. So the next task here is also for hitting really small targets. This is going to be 6-shot ultimate. So as you continue to really find out if a lower sensitivity or faster sensitivity really works for you, you're going to see immediately those results, because we went from the spectrum of having a broad movement versus having now a more small micro movement. And with a scenario like this, you want to keep a constant flow between targets. I'm going really slow. I think I'm on the higher sensitivity right now. Yeah, I am. What's weird is that even if you're on a higher sensitivity, and this is the one where you do the nice full easy 360, as you can tell, you know, ooh, really, really, really fast, right? Controlling a higher sensitivity does not necessarily mean that you're going to be faster, especially when you need to stop this. This has everything to do more with the laws of physics and how you're bouncing between targets. Now, on a lower sensitivity, if we were to go on the opposite spectrum here and trying to hit individual targets, it can be a little bit easier to kind of find a flow. And you can find even on a lower sensitivity, you might be able to garner more speed. Maybe. This depends on you. I tend to get really shaky at a higher sensitivity, but that's also my failure on my mouse control. And I've actually never really used 100 cm. I've always been around the spectrum of 34 to like 58 now. As I've improved my mouse control and as I've been working out, my spectrum of where I feel comfortable aiming really increases dramatically as you can improve those muscles and understand aim. Because you've seen me pop between many sensitivities now and instantly start to find my groove and comfort level. And this is just bouncing between. You don't muscle memory is a myth. Whenever your focus should be improving muscle control. If you can control your muscles, you can control various weights and sensitivities of a mouse pad. All of those factors can come into play, and you can adjust very quickly on the fly if you need to. But something like this is really about bouncing and then stopping the momentum that you're building, and sometimes a heavier mouse, and we're going to get into that after now and talk about those. We're going to talk about the game. We're going to pretty much just stay in Aimlab for all of these scenarios for everything we're going to talk about next. So let's talk about mouse weight, because I actually have one mouse next to me that you all are aware of. I have right here on my desk the G Pro wireless. So the interesting thing about mouse weight and even shape, so realistically I should also call this shape, because right now we're talking about just the discrepancy between weight. You will see the weight and how it glides. This one's heavier because this is just a standard G Pro wireless. Now if I pull in the super light, you'll immediately see, and I don't have it plugged in, you're going to have to focus mostly on my hand here. You're going to see the difference in just how the speed is. I'm using just my fingers on my hand like this and just kind of waving like I'm saying bye, bye. there is an inherent difference between the two. Maybe it's less noticeable on camera, but I can feel the difference just by waving them back and forth. You can feel the weight, and you should be able to see the stop and start. It's like if you were holding a brick in your hand and you're waving versus holding a feather. You're waving and you're going to feel the difference. Those are two extremes. I'm going to use the brick versus feather example just because they're very extreme differences. So the weight does impact because the weight is going to have more friction point on the very spots on the bottom of the mouse for the mice feet. And you can tell that these mice, even though they're the exact same shape, have very different mice feet at the bottom, which also impacts the weight distribution of the overall mouse. I move this from the super light. This is why it doesn't have it underneath. I move it back whenever I use it, so just adding a bit of clarity there. But it's very interesting how much the mouse weight can impact things. So if you're, let's break this down versus a high versus a low sensitivity player. If you're a high sensitivity player, one way to smooth out your aim is having a heavier mouse. That doesn't mean it's the overall solution, but as a higher sensitivity player, using a super light mouse may not be the solution for you, just because it is going to be harder to control because those movements, moving them around, you're not going to have much resistance against your fingers to understand when to stop and start. Now, opposite spectrum, if you are using a light mouse and a low sensitivity, you're going to find that using a light mouse can actually be beneficial, so then you're not tiring out your forearm or also your shoulders. So one part, I think as I get older, perhaps, or maybe, I don't know quite the answer. I think it was due to poor posture when I was at work, to be honest. Over the years, I've been better about my posture, but I usually will find my shoulder gets tired, like the small joint, the shoulder muscle gets very tired pretty quickly, and I have to make sure to sit up straight so my arm sits properly. If I hunch or if I'm at a weird angle, that feels really awkward. And on a heavier mouse or a slow mouse pad, I notice that right away. So as I mentioned the word mouse pad, let's segue to mouse pad, and I'm going to put a different mouse pad here on the table. So just understand that's a variable. That's something you can change, is the mouse weight. Now, I know that sometimes mice have weights, so you can change that up, and it will add some stability. Keep in mind, these are within a margin. They're not going to be an extreme difference or example, but if you're trying to etch out a few percentages here and there, I use all these variables as etching out percentages to gain you. It's almost like you're playing a role-playing game, right? You say, use this mouse pad for plus 10% speed, but minus 5% dexterity. Or you get 5% speed, and you get more accuracy, but you lose something else. Just throwing numbers out. You get it. Like changing out your gear is going to change your stats like a role-playing game. So what I'm going to do, I have a GSR mousepad. So what I have on screen at the moment is the Artisan Otsu Hayate, and I did this purposely for this exercise, is that, let me go back to Circle Track Ultimate just because I think it's a better example. For the distance, go kind of waving back and forth, and I want you guys to see the difference in the mouse pads. It's going to be probably a little bit unnoticeable at first, but I want you guys to look carefully at the distance between these two, because I'm essentially just going to wave my hand. This is a much, before I use it, this is a much more controlled pad versus a speed pad. I think those are the best words to use. Control meaning it feels a lot slower, or you feel more resistance on the pad. And these are both cloth pads. And the Otsu Hayate, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, will feel a lot freer, and it will feel like you're garnering a lot more speed. Sometimes the surface, if it feels rougher, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a slower pad at all. It depends a lot on where the mice feet are placed on the mouse. And it matters the weight of the mouse depending on how much friction you're going to place. And also the type of skates that you even have on the mouse. I'm using here core pads, and the standard G Pro mice feet have a very different glide in comparison. It really changes things up. So that's even another variable to kind of add there as we're talking about mouse pad, is mouse skates. So that's another one to kind of add on to it. I'll timestamp that, because the mouse skates here at the bottom can be quite impactful for how the glide feels, and especially even putting new ones can be a nice reset. So if I have the GSR pad here and I'm using it on a full range of motion, you'll notice just how smoother the aim looks. And let's do the extreme. Let's do the extremes. I'm going to do 100 cm versus around like, let's say 10 centimeters, just like full on, like major distance or difference there, right? So this is a slow one. On the slow mouse pad, you'll see that it just has a nice glide of smoothness because I'm using my forearm, but the problem is on the slower pad, you definitely, I can already tell you what feels engaged. It's like here, and then also my arm a little bit up there, just a little bit. I start to feel it a little bit more up, just because it's engaging in different set of muscles. Now I'm going to put this on the floor. And you can already tell that the faster pad just is a little bit more freeing. I don't look as smooth here and there. Like, I'm picking up a lot more just because I feel a little bit more freer on this pad. But it's hard to notice the stability issues, right? So let's reset. I'm going to do the same thing. Now that we've seen that, we're going to lower it down to the super slow spectrum here. Oh, and let me switch that to 10 because that's what I said I was going to switch this to. I apologize. You'll notice right away that the faster pad, I have a... You can be smooth, but you have to really relax your hands. So I had to think about it. I had to relax on 10 centimeters. This is really fast, by the way. Really fast. I mean, if I did a 180, you know, it just goes fast, right? Now, on this, if we use a slow sensitivity... on the fast pad, just as a reminder, you see the smoothness here that it provides, right? Now, I'm going to springboard back and I'm going to do 10 centimeters here. I just wanted you to see the quick adjustment there. I'm going to bring back the other pad. Hold on. Okay, so I have the other pad and I smacked my keyboard. And I do play up my keyboard at a diagonal, just so I have more space for my arm. Right now I do have the restriction where the camera is, so that makes it a little awkward. So the higher sensitivity, you'll notice that it immediately kind of feels a little bit more stable compared to the faster one where I was very, very jittery. And this is at the 10 centimeters. Even though realistically, you can change this, and the only issue is I'm tracking, you'll notice I have the weird stutter or stop and start. And the weird thing is that even though I'm showing you this example, this is my perspective, depending on your muscle and your hands and your grip style and everything you do, this is going to change for you. This is not going to be the same for you and I because of mouse control and muscles that have been built up throughout the years. And this is, again, just using from 10 centimeters per 360 to 100 centimeters per 360, the dramatic difference that can make. So let's talk about high versus low sensitivity real quick on various pads. If I'm using the slow one, a high sensitivity can really add some resistance or pushback, or I guess they call it swampy feel. Like you have something to push against, so you understand how much force you need to put into the mouse, and it helps. If it's too free, it can be a little bit it's like having an air hockey table and then trying to control something and provide a really slow track to it, right? So a slow pad can help that. It can help on a low sensitivity as well to add even more smoothness, but if you engage a certain muscle group you're not accustomed to, it could feel a little just uncomfortable. You need to be careful, focus on your posture to improve your aim. And if you're using a faster mouse pad, which is the one I have right here, a lower sensitivity can be quite nice because it just really glides and then you feel that speed there. But the downside is when you use a faster one is that it really starts to be a little bit too much and then unrealistic to control. That's when you can use the variable of a heavier mouse to help as well. So let's talk about grip style very quickly. Grip style, I've covered this in other video, but it is a variable, so I'm going to touch upon that. You can also check out my video on various grip styles to help you as well, which I go a lot more in depth on. But this is just going to be a high level to discuss it. Fingertip grip is whenever you're touching each point of the mouse, but no other part of your hand is touching. Right? Now, the best way to describe this is that you are at a base form. You're kind of like a Pokemon, right? The base forms for the starters are not Pikachu. They're Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. I mean, Pikachu is an extra one because of the show, but that's besides the point. You can say that this is like a Charmander, and you can do an evolved version of it and start adding some weird angles to it, you know, move your hand in a weird way, and that's perfectly fine because you found your groove and you find your form. You can look at a lot of pros, they have a lot of weird grip styles because they start to evolve into different Pokemon as I don't know why I'm using Pokemon as an example, just kind of bear with me, it's just a good example. And then next, after fingertip, you have claw. Claw sits to the back, the butt of the mouse, and then you move. With claw, you're going to touch the mouse pad a lot because you're touching the butt of the mouse. Now you can adjust claw where you're touching less of it and then maybe hovering, but then you start to do a modified grip. You evolve into different Pokemon. So if I said the other one's Charmander, this one's a Squirtle, and you start to evolve from there, and you change the grip style, right? Or you can start to incorporate touching more of your palm, but still have a claw grip style, and put it in the back, and you see where it's at an angle. And I've seen pros do a lot of weird stuff. They'll put their hands and cover like this angle where they'll touch this part of it, just so they garner the control. I've even seen this. This is like a modified version of both claw and palm. So if we segue to palm, let's say the last one is now a Bulbasaur, which is the palm grip style. So you palm the mouse, and you just have your full palm in control. Now the downside, let's talk about the downsides of each of these grips and what the challenges may or may not be for each of them. Let's kind of go back to a kind of middle of the road between all these sensitivities here that we've kind of discussed so far. The downsides of all of them. So if I'm using fingertip grip, it's good, but the downside is that you will lack... It gains speed, but it can sometimes lack precision, which is the hard part of this variable. So you can change that variable by going to a low sensitivity since you have speed and kind of find a middle ground with it. Now, if you were using a, let's say, claw grip, the downside, it's like the middle between palm and fingertip, but you will be touching the mouse pad more. So you need to kind of find the middle of it. The problem with claws, you start to lose your angles and you start to use more of your arm. So if you're using too high of a sensitivity or low of a sensitivity, you need to engage different muscle groups and kind of modify and adjust. And that can be a little tricky for some. Now for palm, if you're just full palming it, this can be hard to garner precision at a high sensitivity. And hitting like small targets doesn't mean it's impossible, but the type of muscles that it starts to engage and what it does. So there's not much of a... Let's talk about the hand size that you have. I actually watch Rocket Jump Ninja, and I'm a big fan of his content, FYI. If he happens to ever watch one of my videos, that would be insane. I don't think there's no way he's ever watching one of my videos. But nonetheless, I really enjoy his theory on hand size. I 100% agree with them that hand size is a factor in what people gravitate towards and what feels comfortable in terms of picking a mouse, in terms of the grip style, in terms of what they do. I happen to have not the largest hands. You know what they say about large hands and small hands? Nothing. There's just the hand size. So what you look at when you have your hand size is you have to realize if you, let's say you have, think of like a pianist. A pianist will have long fingers, right? Especially on the piano, the long lanky hands, and usually they'll have a long lanky build. And that kind of helps them hit the keys. For me, I struggle because I can't really stretch my hand all the way. I'm trying to do it just as an example to hit all the keys on a piano. Same thing with a guitar. So if I was pretending this is a guitar and I was trying to do a bar chord, and I do a bar chord and I screw it up because my fingers don't go all the way, I start to develop my own style on how to achieve that same result that somebody comparatively with longer fingers. Right? The same thing with like being a doctor. You do not see a doctor become a big buff burly man that's 400 pounds of pure muscle. You usually see a doctor that's lanky, maybe lean. So then the reason why when you're in surgery, if you don't know your own strength and you have to do very micro small adjustments and movements, well, you want to be careful with how much pressure you're going to put, right? That's the important part about being a doctor, especially when you're doing surgery, if that happens to be your profession of being more of a surgeon, rather than a doctor. So that's really important in terms of that overall factor. So what does that mean with your hand size? Well, perhaps a certain grip style and a certain sensitivity you'll gravitate towards because it's easier for you to kind of find the middle ground. Let's say if you have a normal size hand that doesn't go into one spectrum or the other, or if you have or just say a normal hand, then you kind of find your style and find what you're doing. Or let's say you have the claw of a bear, you know, like you're a burly man, a big man, you know, or woman, doesn't matter. And you have the big hand, well, maybe a palm style grip works for you because you can't necessarily grip because you have like very thick fingers. And you've all seen individuals, everyone's hands are different, right? Or somebody maybe have like just a big hand, and so maybe those small movements are going to feel less comfortable, and maybe they will feel more comfortable. Those are questions you have to ask yourself. Look at your hand and be realistic of what works for you. You've probably seen a lot of pros, especially on the CSGO spectrum, where you'll see skinny, small, lean, lean muscular, whatever, and they'll use more of like a fingertip grip, and they are just lean, versus somebody, and maybe they use a higher sensitivity, just as an example. Or if you see a big man, a strong, muscular, 400 pound, 200 pound, pure muscle built, and they'll use a lower sensitivity to impact that. So as I kind of talk about even my own journey going through this, learning about muscle build and posture, that's going to be the next variable that we talk about. I've been on the full spectrum. I have been extremely unhealthy around the 200-pound range without working out, and I was using a higher sensitivity around that time frame, and my diet and everything was impacting me. I did not feel healthy. My aim was decent around that time, but it didn't feel really good. So as I lost weight, the lowest I've been is 145, and I was too skinny. So I was developing weird cramps here and there in my muscles, and my posture was not great because I was getting tired whenever I was sitting for long periods of time. So as I gained muscle, let's say I was around the 155, 165 range, I started to realize just what I needed to change to be in the middle. But each of those required a different sensitivity at the time. I will say whenever I was really skinny, I was using a really much higher sensitivity, probably not high, probably around 34 centimeters. And then as I got a little bit more muscle, the reason why I would say as I gained more muscle, why I started dropping my sensitivity was just because of the muscle control. The muscle control that I started to develop, I just felt more comfortable dropping it a little bit because I knew that I had the speed, right? And the speed is an important factor for what you're trying to achieve. Just want to kind of highlight there. Now, your posture is very important. You probably see a lot of pros that sometimes have really bad posture, but you have to be mindful of the future, and you don't want to, as you continue to get older and continue to age, or even continue to work out. Sometimes if you work out and then you have the friction in your joints, it cannot be very positive. So you got to think kind of long run. Think about your health. Even if you sacrifice a bit of accuracy now, I promise you in the long run, you'll continue to improve and get more of that, what you're looking for in terms of your overall health and health and overall improving your mouse control and sensitivity. Posture is just such an important factor in terms of sitting up straight, especially if I even, if I get a little closer to the microphone, I know you can't see it, but if I tend to kind of hunch over just a little bit and I'm using a low sensitivity, I will feel it in my shoulder joint at the angle that I'm sitting. I have to sit up straight, and whenever I wave, my arm is in a nice kind of relaxed position, and because of that, I'm able to kind of move a lot faster, even at this sensitivity, and kind of flick to somebody if I need to, if they're right there. But if I hunch in any way, I do feel uncomfortable. Now, this is because of that sensitivity. Let's say I was hunched over, and I'm hunched over right now, and I use a really high sensitivity. It really doesn't matter as much, but I guarantee you, if you had better posture and blood flow, that'll also help. So hydration, diet, as we segue over to diet, are all very, very, very important. Major factors to really consider. Because how you eat, how much water, because hydration is important. Even when you go to the gym, imagine that you just were dehydrated. That impacts your workout for the day, how much you're able to lift, how uncomfortable it would feel on your joints and on your muscles. Or perhaps if you ate poorly and you ate too much right before you worked out, you would feel it in your workout, right? You would either feel a little sluggish, maybe you feel a little tired, or if you didn't eat beforehand, you would feel the shakiness in your hands. And when you're working out, this is something I was going to highlight and I forgot to mention it, is that whenever you're working out, I notice that I do a lot of rowing and I do a lot of lifting. But the interesting part is that whenever I did that, it made my hands shakier over time. Because I've been working out like every single day. I kind of took a 2-day break just to kind of notice how it would feel on my hands again, if I would get some of that stability back. And you do, but if you work out every single day and you're using your hands, I notice at a very high sensitivity, it could be a margin of error. Let's say it's a few percentage. That shakiness after you work out for a really long time, like you could try it yourself. Go lift for, 15 minutes straight or 30 minutes straight, a weight, and then go aim. And of course, you're going to feel your hands just kind of feel a little wobbly, or after you run. If you tried running and then you're kind of like sitting down on the couch, you're just kind of like, whew, man, I feel really worn out. Well, that's the shakiness that we're talking about.
So as your body gets used to it, you start to develop a nice sense of calm. And when the adrenaline kicks, when you're in game, this is important. These are two really important to tie together. That whenever you are in game and you feel the adrenaline rush, you know how to handle that stress. Because when the adrenaline kicks in, I actually have had even pros reach out to me that when the adrenaline kicks in, you will find that you develop a shakiness. Unintentional or not, it's just a shakiness because it's your genes or your base, whatever animal instincts are kicking in of how you react to a situation because your adrenaline is pumping and you're ready to quote unquote fight or flight, right? That's really, really important. So as we wrap up, let's talk about the games now. And I know this is a lot of information. I'll timestamp everything. I appreciate your patience as you're watching this. It really means a whole lot to support on the channel. I know this is a longer video, and I hope that all of you guys find beneficial information. Is that while this is great, look at this aim trainer. This is a great aim trainer, but you always hear the conversation time and time again. Just go play the game. Yes, I agree. Go play the game. Remember that an aim trainer is here to help you work on those muscles, right? If you're going to the gym, you're working on muscles, but you're not necessarily working on the specific muscles that are going to help you in the sport. Let's say you're a basketball player and all you do is run and lift weights. Well, you are still needing to practice to work on those muscles to throw the basketball, to get comfortable what it feels like to throw a basketball, right? So just like this, will this scenario, here's an example, will this scenario help you on CSGO? Probably not. Why are you tracking somebody in such a smooth motion in CSGO? This scenario is probably going to be better fit on one wall, 6 targets, or even 6-shot ultimate that we just saw, you know, the really small targets where you're ping-boarding back and forth to. Those are going to be a lot more beneficial to you in CSGO than this would, because you're hitting small targets. Remember the game. So if we're thinking CSGO, then you're going to think maybe lower sensitivity, precision for shot accuracy are going to matter a lot more. Valorant, their ability, so you need to focus on first shot accuracy, but at the same time, you need to have a range of movement where you're able to flick maybe towards more horizontal and perhaps a 180 in case somebody teleports behind you, such as like an Omen in a really weird spot. I don't know why they would do that, but, you know, again, use your best judgment. For Quake, well, it's going to be a lot of LG tracking, so maybe this scenario makes a whole lot of sense in going in game. But of course, you need to have a fast sensitivity, so you need to find how you can do a clean 180 consistently as you're jumping around and bouncing around. And maybe this sensitivity isn't best, because what if somebody is literally flying across the air consistently and I need to track them for that kill? And the same thing for Apex as you're wall bouncing. What's going to feel comfortable? Is the target going to be exactly in front of you at all times? Maybe not, but you also need to focus that Apex kind of encompasses a lot of aim. So when maybe you need that small wingman shot at over 180 meters because the map is super large, but then you also need to have the recoil control whenever you're up close and tracking, such as the scenario that we're doing now. So you need to have a full spectrum of aim and comfort level. And even like if you're playing Battlefield or Call of Duty, those games require a lot of 180 movement. Are you going to get tired from doing this for 30 minutes straight? And can you do it consistently? Like, consistently flicking, because you're picking up loot. You're running around, you're picking up loot. Like, just imagine your movement picking up loot. And then you see somebody, and then you shoot. And then you go over here, and then you shoot control recoil. And then you go over here, you shoot control recoil, and go around. And do this for a few moments, just like we were doing Spider Shot 180, and ask yourself the honest question. Can you do this for an extended period of time without hurting yourself? Do you have good posture? What's going to work? How are you sitting? How is your keyboard? All those things matter when you're looking at the game in terms of various variables from everything that we're talking about. So again, this is a very long video, and I appreciate your patience, and I hope that you really learn something. Again, these are a lot of theories. The theories that we covered range from the game that you're in, from the mouse weight, from the mouse pad, the grip style and hand size, to muscle build and posture, to your diet, and then even then discussing the overall game that you're trying to achieve these results on. You can have a fantastic body and be completely fit and suck at every single sport. So you can have the best Aimlab scores or best Kovac scores and be the best and not be good at any sports. Think of somebody who's very fit and maybe they suck at baseball, basketball, soccer, but at least they are fit, right? It's to take that fit body and then go into the specific game that you're going into, and then refining it and using those muscles because those muscle groups are there, and then focusing on what's going to help you improve and become a better gamer, or even in this, I guess in this example, better at that said sport. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all of you. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to show your support because it means a whole lot. And I'll see you guys all in the next video.